In this seminar, we're going to talk about your big emotions and strategies to address them. Straight up, if someone had talked to me about this stuff early on in my homeschool years, I would have said, nope, too weird. But then I spent years struggling to deal with my big emotions, discovering that actually the hardest thing of my homeschool years wasn't trying to figure out the routine or curriculum or schedules or my method. It wasn't about even trying to convince the neighbors that what I was doing was a good thing or the in-laws. Nope. The most challenging aspect was dealing with my big emotions. So I spent years struggling to deal with my big emotions. I spent years not feeling good enough. And then finally, when I'd hit a wall or two or three, I finally accepted that maybe there was some inner work for me to do. I don't remember the specific day. There were a few. I've written about a few. One particular homeschool day, I remember being especially frustrated. Imagine with me, if you will, to an especially frustrating day that you might have had. What could be frustrating us? Oh, I don't know. A child being unkind, kids fighting again, nobody wanted to do the thing I had so lovingly planned for them, the house was a mess, I was feeling unsupported and disconnected from others. Just a few possibilities there. What would you add to the list? There are so many possibilities, and I'm going to share 3 different stories of my big emotions in my homeschool. And really, they're a concoction of the things I experienced and also the things that I've learned along the way with other homeschool moms. So join me in addressing our big emotions. Let me tell you about my story of overwhelm. So imagine, if you will, a homeschool day where probably it's January or February, what I call slump month. It's probably the 3rd or 4th year into homeschooling. I've got 4 kids. I've got an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a toddler who is dodging Cheerios off his high chair. And I occupy him as I can so I can do lessons with my other 3 kids. I'm pretty eager to maintain the clever private school that I've created in my home. I had this idea that I want to individualize my education for my kids, which is amazing and the definite benefit of homeschooling. But when I said that to myself, I meant I will make a more precise, more academic education for my kids in my homeschool room than a private school could do. So we were doing all the things. I was going back and forth between one child to the next. Maybe we were doing cursive or Latin or logic, or we were doing all the things, even at that age, those ages. And I really didn't enjoy the multitasking aspect, but I would have been fine with it if kids were actually agreeable, and weren't fidgeting and they weren't frustrated and they weren't showing me that they didn't want to be there. So it turns out I can remember being in a small town at the time. We were traveling as we were homeschooling as well. Didn't know anybody. I remember thinking, I am really done with this. I feel so overwhelmed. So much is going on. I don't know how to make sure that they do everything. I don't know how to feel happy about what I'm doing. I'm excited about what I'm doing when I'm planning it, but then when I bring it to them, some days are great and some days aren't great at all. But there's just too many things to do, and I'm not really being present in the moment. I'm always expecting to do the next thing, moving back and forth between child and child, trying to avoid my Facebook page, try to keep on task in the moment. The kitchen is a mess, of course. There is science experiments on the counter, molding. Maybe they're experiments, maybe they're edible. We can't figure this out after a certain number of time as homeschoolers, but there was just so much. I felt overwhelmed. So many big emotions. So here's my story of not feeling good enough. A story that I have heard in varying forms from many other homeschool moms as I'm life coaching. Not good enough. That is a thought that I hear on repeat. Sometimes it's when mom is having a tough day with those big emotions. Maybe the question pops up in her head that, should I be doing this? Clearly, I don't know what I'm doing. Or it appears that other people know what they're doing better. Of course, when the kids are all bundled up in their beds at night and you're watching them, they're snoring, they're just snuggled cozily in their beds, you're thinking, oh, yeah, this is amazing. This is an amazing lifestyle. I'm going to figure this out. I want to do this for my child. It's going to be the best thing ever. Except then you come across an Instagram account or a TikTok account, or you just get, you hear about somebody else's cool things that they're doing in their homeschool, or they have expectations of the child. They're doing violin lessons in a way that you wouldn't expect your child to do violin practice, or maybe they're doing a cool theater production together, and you're like, I should be doing that. Should I be doing that? My kids don't like doing that, but that might be better if somebody else did that, or if my kids did something that somebody else's homeschool was doing. Sometimes this experience happens when a family member, grandpa, questions the child on what they were doing after lunch. Why were they playing outside today? Isn't it school day? Sometimes that question comes up after a day of errands. We call it a field trip for a homeschool mom or for homeschool kids. But when nearly every stranger that the child meets asks if the kids are done school that day, or what grade their kids are in, or whether your home environment or homeschool is a better opportunity than a schooled environment, and you wonder, is it good enough? Even if we don't have a steady stream of those potentially comparing scenarios, we all have that internal critic, that homeschool mom critic that says, but I could be doing more, or at least do what I'm doing better. So which story of doubt should I share with you? There's so many possibilities. I think doubt comes with the homeschool territory. We feel the serious responsibility of imprinting on our child all the things they need to know about morality, about people, about purpose, about our feelings, following their interests, developing their aptitudes, all of this, and we're just trying to keep them alive if they're toddlers or teenagers. Not following the grain of the culture would naturally make anyone question themselves, no matter what we chose to do. We don't need to have a constant stream of questions, other people's questions or our own, about homeschool socialization, about academics, about the philosophy, about whether we should be doing this thing to encourage our uncertainties. We already have them here. Although a constant dribble of outsiders' worries makes it worse. And it turns out we get a constant supply. Be surrounded by that many people that are not doing what we're doing. And of course, we're going to experience doubt at times. What would you say is one of your greatest doubts about homeschooling? Grab your journal and write it down. And at this point, why don't you also write down a moment that you may have had a story of overwhelm, or maybe you've had other big emotions in your homeschool. Write that down. So I've shared with you 3 different stories around our big emotions in homeschool, or at least mine. And because I have met so many other homeschool parents, I know these are not uncommon. And I'm sure that you have, when you first came to the seminar, you were thinking about a specific big emotion that you have, and maybe it was none of the things that I shared. So write down the one that you're most concerned about, because here's what I'm going to do today. We're going to talk about the 5 things that I wish I knew that I think would value you to learn about and to create a plan, 5 different elements to create a plan to address your big emotions. And if we haven't met, my name is Teresa. I write, I podcast, and I life coach over at capturingthecharmedlife.com, a website that I started in the early days of my homeschool years. For many years, I homeschooled my 4 kids, now aged 22, 19, almost 18, and almost 15. So I homeschooled 4 kids and I had the time of my life. So many amazing memories, except for the days I didn't. And you know that I know that the big emotions, usually our big emotions, were often the culprits to sabotaging a day. So we thought at the time it might have been somebody else's emotions that were sabotaging our day, but we've come to understand that we're responsible for our own big emotions and how we engage our kids. So now I work as a life coach and I help other homeschool parents just like you to shed what's not working so you can show up in your homeschool authentically, confidently, and purposefully. And I love doing what I'm doing. You don't have to walk alone. You don't have to wonder if what you're doing is good enough, and you don't have to doubt. Can I tell you that I work with moms who have big emotions, which pretty much covers the gamut of humanity? I would like to think that homeschool moms have the superhuman skill to not be reactive, but I'm looking at myself in the video and I know that's not true. And I listen to all the stories and varied stories. Sometimes it is anger that people don't know how to engage their own anger. Sometimes it is a pervading sense of rejection that they're reacting to and they're living in a shame storm. Sometimes it's just as simple as not feeling supported. Not so simple, but it is not as complicated as, say, a shame storm. Trying to get support, not so simple. But there are a variety of reasons why homeschool moms want to address their big emotions. You can learn more about a few of the homeschool moms that I work with on my website. Brittany had worked with me to establish her boundaries and get clear on her boundaries. Carla is someone who found a lot of use in my affirmations download, one of the most popular downloads that I have. And I can tell you all sorts of different names, but I've learned that every homeschool mom comes to this homeschool thing for different reasons. And we want to do different things for our children or offer our children different things. And we come to our homeschool mom lives with a story that sometimes complicates how we're showing up each day. I'm going to guess that I probably work with homeschool moms just like you. You don't have to create a plan to address your big emotions. You can do what most of us do nothing, or do what you've always done. Just react. I did. Lots of people do. Until we hit the wall of deep frustration and decide we've had quite enough. We want to figure it out, and we can't figure it out by ourselves. It's probably cliche to say that as a homeschool mom, I read a lot. I didn't read a lot. Confession, I didn't read a lot until I was about 18. I didn't want to unless I had to. And so that I have a Homeschool Mama book club now, that I read a lot beyond my homeschool read alouds is kind of funny. It probably would shock my grade 12 teacher, my grade 12 English teacher, who said to me, quote, "I know who reads and I know who watches TV, and you need to pick up a book." Well, 'tis not so anymore. Now I like to read across the genres, and one of them, which has nothing to do with my book club, is about time travel. I like reading about time travel, just like fictional narratives. It just sounds fun to imagine that you could cross the time, whatever they call it. One of my favorite movies is the movie called Age of Adeline, and there's another one called Almost Time, and they're both time travel movies. I wish I could time travel back into my early days of homeschooling or just as a mother and have someone say, "Hey, I want to sit down and have a chat with you about the most important things that you need to do for you so that you can show up on purpose in your homeschool mom life." And I didn't have that. And you have the opportunity of hearing these 5 things now. I could share many different strategies, and I do in our group coaching. But here's 5 things that I wish I had been told way earlier on, and that I actually might have had a gentle accountability partner to actually do it. They are these 5 things. One is to build self-awareness practices so that I can watch how I'm showing up. It can actually understand why I feel what I feel and understand what my thoughts were before my feelings. The second thing is to practice a pause. If I'm feeling heated or upset or really sad and likely to just burst out in something that's not helpful with my kids, with literally anybody, but definitely with my homeschool kids, practicing a pause. You can walk away and not say anything if that would be the best choice in that moment. The third thing is to build in mindful practices. Say grabbing an alarm clock, because we didn't have phones when I started homeschooling or mothering, to put an alarm that says to stop and check in with myself, ask myself how I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. Because most of our emotions are just a big swirl of what we feel in our bodies and the thoughts or stories that we're telling ourselves. And the fifth thing is you have to build community and support that feels like community and support, not just a theoretical community that looks like a community, but one that feels authentically connecting and supportive. Is this you? You don't know how to deal with your big emotions when your kiddo is having their big emotions. And you know you're making it worse in how you react. This was definitely me. You can't put a finger on it, but there's too many things going on and everything feels too much. That experience of overwhelm, just too many feelings, too much going on. You want to show up as your best self rather than with your tried and true approach or patterns, but not so useful patterns. And you really have tried all the things, but nothing feels like it's getting to the heart of what you're really dealing with. You understand that more is caught than taught in how you engage your kids, and that concerns you. And you might also know that this is you if you don't feel supported to do this process of really digging deep into the things that matter to you with anyone else. Imagine if you were practiced in a pause before you reacted to your child. Imagine if you knew for certain you were honoring your child as a separate person, or that you had a plan to address your big emotions and you knew how to be proactive, responsive, and less reactive. Imagine if you felt like you were enough and you could do this homeschool thing with confidence. Imagine if you felt supported, or you were super clear in when to include self-compassion strategies and how they would actually benefit you. Imagine if you knew you were teaching your child self-compassion strategies, emotional regulation, and healthy communication too. Wow, what a homeschool life that would be. One of the mistakes that homeschool moms make is that we're not clear on what's going on because we are accustomed to feeling a certain way. Maybe we get angry at certain things and we always have got angry at those things. We didn't actually explore it, but we just took it into mothering and then we took it into homeschooling and we weren't clear as to where it came from, why we chose to engage the way we chose to engage. Or maybe we're overwhelmed and we just can't see the forest through the trees. I wish I could turn the computer around right now because I live in a forest and I'm not actually sure what that means, forest through the trees, but you know what I'm referring to. There's so many things going on. There's so many little people's voices. There's our voices inside saying, you have to do more, or you at least have to do all the things you have on your list today, or you have to do what other people are doing, or you have these expectations that someone else really is saying to you and you feel compelled by it. So you're so occupied by so many things, you're not clear on what's going on. For these reasons, I think this is a mistake on homeschool moms' part, not spending time to get clear on what's going on. I would say another mistake is not having an assessment plan to really understand that thing that's going on. To actually have a routine plan to go back maybe once a month, once every 3 months, and say, how's this thing working for me, homeschooling? Or how's the way I'm homeschooling working for me? Or what do the kids think about homeschooling? How is it working for them? What is the general emotional experience of it? Now, despite the fact that my website is called Capturing the Charmed Life, I called it that in my early days and decided not to change it later. But in the early days, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted utopia. You're welcome. Turns out I didn't get it. As per usual, growth was required. And so capturing a charmed life, experiencing utopia isn't something on this planet. And I had my very special reasons, very understandable reasons why I wanted that. But I've come to understand that we are all going to have challenges that will compel us to growth. And we can turn those challenges into our charms. But if we don't have a plan to assess what those challenges are, we not only don't know what's going on, but there is no way that we're going to move towards growth and actually transforming those challenges. And even when we have an idea of what's going on, we don't necessarily create an action plan to do anything about it. Or if we do, like we typically do at the beginning of the new year, which is when I'm recording this, we create all these plans around the things that we want to do for our life. And then we don't follow through. We don't have a gentle accountability plan or approach to actually make it happen over the course of time. We think we don't have enough time to deal with these things. And that is both true and untrue at the same time. We don't. We've got a lot going on. So to sit down and say, yeah, sure, we'll just like sit and have a half-hour quiet time in the morning and pray and read and, do all the things that we know would be serving our souls. We don't have time to do that. And even if we had time, we'll surely be interrupted. And that is true. And also, I'll make the case that that is true. I know it to be true, had the experience. The amount of energy that we expend in being frustrated or confused or sad or irritated or agitated or intense, or you fill in the blank for the big emotion, that amount of time that we expend experiencing those emotions, that's emotional energy that we're not putting into being present in our life right now and being with our kids and investing that time doing things on purpose. So we're kind of wasting energy over there. So I would suggest that actually we don't have a choice. We have to make the time. Homeschool moms often aren't looking at their own needs. They're looking at their kids' needs because that's why we're here. We're here to be a mother and to nurture them. We are here to give them an education, to really do all the things. And there's a lot of things. So we're here to do something for our kids. And this discussion, this concept of not meeting your own needs is definitely a challenge that I had. It is the reason that I wrote the book, Homeschool Mama Self-Care Nurturing the Nurturer, because it was my experience. I hit the wall at one point in that third or fourth year, and I came to understand that one of the biggest reasons why I hit a wall of I can't do this anymore is because I didn't even know what my needs were, let alone wanting to meet my needs, because I was not accustomed to dealing with other people's or with my own needs. I was only accustomed to dealing with other people's needs. Hadn't even dawned on me that maybe I was also a human being and I do have needs. Whether I want to be super mom or not is besides the point. I am a human. There is no such thing as super mom. We need to nurture the nurturer first. So I notice, especially as I've experienced this myself, that other moms are not even always acknowledging they have needs. A common mistake that homeschool moms make is that we respond to other people's needs and we don't build time and separateness for ourselves. When I went into homeschooling, I'd already decided to be a mother and stay-at-home mom. It's something that I wanted to do, even though I'd gone to do my Bachelor of Science in nursing. I worked as a nurse, and I had always intended to be a mom at home. It was a goal that I had. I even wrote it in my high school yearbook. Also said I'd marry a Patrick Swayze, which I kind of did. My husband definitely looks like him, doesn't dance like him, but I digress. So it turns out I saw myself as a mother, which is beautiful. And I have been honored to do it for so many years with 4 very unique children. One of them you see right here. And yet, the concept of me building time for myself, separateness, separate time for myself, to continue to grow and learn and to discover that I am not going to homeschool forever because my kids are apparently supposed to grow up and leave. Who knew I wasn't going to do this in a full-time occupation forever? And it turns out that will most likely be your experience too. I know there's exceptions to those rules. So we need to build time and separateness for us so that when the kids grow up, we'll know what we're doing next. Or if you are among the many, like me, who have also homeschooled and had some job of some sort as well, combining the two, you need to create space, separate time, building time in just for you. So this is a mistake I think we can curtail. And the power of going to the grocery store once a week. If you have little children and you get to go to the grocery store by yourself, it feels like a breather, a time away. And though that is a lifeline in the early days, I encourage you to build a community or a support system, maybe exchange kids once a month or once every few weeks with another mom so that you can get away for just an hour or two. Or maybe that's your partner or that's your best friend or a parent or someone close that can actually help you take a breather beyond the grocery store. One of the most unusual things that I remember hearing probably after I started to read Kristin Neff's book, Self-Compassion, was that we actually have a relationship with ourselves, and how we relate to ourselves is how we relate to everyone else in our world. But we're not usually clear on what our relationship is with ourselves. If you've heard the concepts of negative self-talk, or, maybe living in a shame spiral or experiencing a shame spiral, we're speaking to ourselves in those moments. When we feel bad about ourselves, we're feeling bad about ourselves because we're speaking to ourselves about something in a way that isn't kind, or that probably is just not true. Or even if it is true, we can learn to be gracious and forgive even ourselves. But I find that often homeschool moms aren't clear on that concept, that we have a relationship with ourselves and we're responsible to take care of ourselves. A mistake we make is not to consider how we speak to ourselves. It's funny that in regular conversations about boundaries, we're often referring to boundary breaking of other people. But sometimes the worst boundary breakers are ourselves. How we speak to ourselves matters. Would you say that you speak to yourself kindly? So the thing about creating mindfulness moments is that it helps us to uncover how we really are speaking to ourselves. This was life-shifting for me when I was in a live seminar with Dr. Daniel Amen back in about 15 years ago. And I remember him sharing that concept that I later learned wasn't his, but he shared this concept about challenging your automatic negative thoughts. So I remember him saying that if you created a practice of checking in with yourself and asking yourself, how are you feeling? What's been going on? What's the thought that you had before that feeling? Usually there's a story of a thought around a thought, and we usually buy into that thought and therefore end up with a certain feeling. You see your child not doing their math. You've been sitting there with that child trying to help them figure out their thing for 20 minutes. They're not doing anything. They're wiggling. They're doing this. They're like, oh, I want to just leave, writing stars, drawing, all manner of things, but they're not doing what you asked them to do. Perhaps you have been in the scenario where you say to yourself, why are you doing this? Clearly, you are trying to be contrary, or you're lazy, or you fill in the blank, whatever it is that might first come to mind when I say that scenario. We're telling ourselves a story around that scenario, which probably isn't true, but we've seen it at some point. We've believed that there was a thought that was connected to that scenario. We feel that this is the thing that's going on. If we create mindful moments in the day to check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, how are we feeling? What's been going on? What's our thought? What's the story behind that thought? We can begin to learn that we are telling ourselves all manners of unkindnesses, or all manner of unkindnesses, and question what our thoughts are. So I ask you, are you kind to yourself? Are you speaking truth to yourself? Would you speak like you're speaking to your friend? How can you change how you're speaking to yourself? 2 resources that I offer on my website you can find in the search bar is the Thought Care Checklist that includes all these questions. And also, very famously, or one of the most downloaded resources that I offer is the Daily Homeschool Mama Affirmations, speaking truths to ourselves, speaking kindnesses to ourselves. You can access both of those on my website. A common mistake I see with everyone, including myself, has been to assume that our validation comes from others. If we don't give ourselves validation for our homeschool choice, or how we're homeschooling our kids, or the curriculum choices we make, or the extracurricular activities we choose or don't choose, or you fill in the blank, whatever comes to mind when I start speaking about these things. If you are not choosing it for yourself, deciding that you want to do it because you want to do it, then you will always be looking to everyone else to give you the stamp of approval. And what will you do when they don't? Probably you'll feel frustrated, anxious, worried, consumed, all sorts of feelings that are interfering with the choices that you're making. Be clear on the reason that you're doing what you're doing. Reevaluate on occasion. Take a listen to your child and ask if it's working for them. Take a listen and ask if it's working for you. Don't take a listen and ask if it's working for everyone except for those people. Another mistake we can make is to not practice self-awareness. Of course, we have a lot of things to do. So adding yet another self-care strategy like sitting down with our own emotions or checking in with ourselves during the day feels like it is a lot of work. Well, not really, but in the beginning, when you practice anything new, it feels like it takes up time. The thing with self-care strategies like mindfulness or meditation or prayer or journaling or chatting with someone to clarify what you think, all of those things actually help you be clear where your energy is going. So you're not preoccupied with things that you don't really want to invest time in. How do you address self-criticism or self-judgment or that feeling of not good enough or guilt or perfectionism? I think you can do something about those experiences. You don't just have to sit in them and experience them because you are familiar with them. I think you can build in practices to learn more about those experiences. Self-awareness strategies like what we're speaking to here. You need to practice it to get clear on what it is you're actually dealing with. What are the big emotions? What are the experiences that you're having in your life, not just in homeschooling, but all the things that are surrounding your homeschool life? When you get clearer on those things, you spend more time with them, then you begin to clarify why you're being triggered in a certain direction. If you're chatting about it with me or someone like me or a friend that is able to do a lot of reflective listening, you'll get clearer on what the patterns are, your patterns, or what your thoughts are and why they're there. You could, of course, not address it at all. You could do the opposite. Just beat yourself up. Make yourself feel bad. Remind yourself how horrible your parenting really is and you're homeschooling mediocre at best. Or at the very least, just remember that you are just a wee bit incompetent or incapable. Or you could learn about that person in your head saying all those things to you, and say to that person, thanks, no thanks. I have got to learn a new way to speak to myself and engage all the internal things, the challenges that I have inside of myself. You can do that by step 1, creating self-awareness strategies. So where would you like to go from here? You can figure this out alone, slowly simmering away like I have. You can grapple with it alongside confusion and at times turmoil. A whole lot of book reading. I've done that. Lots of courses, lots of podcasts. Chatted endlessly with supportive friends, sometimes talking circles of anxiety, but sometimes they were useful conversations. And of course, there's always therapy. And you're also welcome to join me in group coaching for building boundaries. If we get to know each other well enough, doing that alongside another person can sometimes be really useful to have a sense of how they're challenged by something and how they are moving in their particular boundary challenge. But you can also work one-on-one with me. So if either of those are of interest to you, you can just press the link down below and connect with me. And if there isn't a link down below, you can head over to my website, capturingthecharmedlife.com. Here I introduce you to 3 real homeschool mamas who have worked with me, and I want to share with you what they've said about working with me. Britt is a homeschool mom of 3, and she said, I knew I had boundary issues. I just wasn't clear on when, why, or how that began. And Teresa really held space to help me explore it. She listens deeply and asks the most poignant, reflective questions. She's definitely a gifted space holder and quite unique in a way I've only experienced with a handful of people in my life. It's been integral to unearth these insights and remember them when I'm in the middle of a sort of boundary crisis or a situation that has the potential to cross my boundaries in an unhealthy way. It anchors me and supports me in responding, then immediately and unconsciously reacting. Holly said, Teresa has been a tremendous value towards my growth in homeschooling and self-care. She's encouraging and supportive of all that I long to pursue. I'm so grateful that I have her to walk alongside me in this journey. Okay, I'm beaming right here because it has been a true pleasure to walk alongside other homeschool moms in their life journey. And Carla said, Teresa is the real deal, an experienced homeschool mom who's been there, done that, and can help others get out of overwhelm. Her ability to hold space for silence and difficult feelings makes her no small talk approach so effective. I trust her. Her retreat, resources, and Ask Me Anything meetings have served me tremendously. I'm so glad she's in my corner. And if you are still in this webinar and interested in participating in a community like that or looking for coaching, definitely connect with me. And thanks for joining me today. It has been such a pleasure to connect with you. I would love it if you could reach out to me, whether that is through my podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care. I'm on Instagram at Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Facebook, same name, and my website, which I named long before I ever considered writing a book or doing a podcast or being a life coach. It is capturing the charmed life. And between you and me, I've learned there are a whole lot of charms in homeschooling, but there's also challenges. So I'm here to help you turn your homeschool challenges into your homeschool charms. Thanks for spending time with me.